AITA for refusing to pay my sister's bills after she blew all of her money on unnecessary purchases. I, 28M, have a sister, Megan, 30F, who has always had a tendency to live beyond her means. Growing up, our parents were strict with finances, but Megan never really learned to manage money properly. She's always had a by now, worry later attitude, which has led to a lot of problems. In the past few years, she's gotten herself into credit card debt, and I've had to step in multiple times to help her out when things got really bad. This year, however, things reached a breaking point, and now I'm wondering if I'm the asshole for refusing to help her anymore. So a little backstory. Megan has a good job and makes decent money. She's a marketing director for a mid-sized company, but she's always been a spender. Every time I talk to her, she's got a new expensive gadget, outfit, or trip planned. Last year, she bought a new car, one of those fancy, high-end SUVs, despite already having a car that was perfectly fine and paid off. She said she deserved it, and that it was time to treat herself. Well, that car payment added a huge chunk to her monthly expenses, and she started getting behind on her bills. Instead of cutting back, she just kept racking up credit card debt. At first, I felt bad for her. I thought maybe she just needed a little bit of guidance, so I started having conversations with her about budgeting, saving, and living within her means. I even helped her set up a plan to pay down her credit card debt, but that lasted only a few months. She makes some progress, then go on a shopping spree, or take a last-minute trip to Paris or New York. A few months ago, Megan called me in a panic. She said she was in deep trouble because she couldn't pay her bills and was facing possible eviction from her apartment. She mentioned that she had maxed out her credit cards, her car payment was overdue, and she had no idea how she was going to get out of the mess she created. I could hear the desperation in her voice, so I agreed to help her out one more time. I paid off her credit card debt and gave her enough money to cover her rent for the next couple of months, but I told her it had to be the last time I bailed her out. I also made it clear that if she wanted my help in the future, she would have to stick to the budgeting plan we set up, and I wouldn't give her any more money until I saw some real change in her habits. Megan agreed and promised to do better, but within a month, she was right back to her old ways. 2 weeks ago, she called again, saying she needed help with her rent. She told me she had gone on a spontaneous trip to Las Vegas and had spent all her savings on the trip, buying expensive clothes and dining at fancy restaurants. She admitted that she didn't budget for the trip, and now she couldn't pay her rent or bills. I was furious. I told her that I wasn't going to help her this time. I reminded her that I'd given her money twice in the last year, and that she hadn't made any effort to change her spending habits. She argued that she was in a tough spot, and that I was her only family member who could help. She even brought up how much I had helped in the past, and said it wasn't fair for me to just leave her hanging now. I was firm in my decision, though. I told her that it was time for her to face the consequences of her actions and learn how to manage her own finances. I reminded her that she was an adult, and that part of being an adult was taking responsibility for your own mistakes. She was really upset and tried to guilt-trip me, saying that I was abandoning her when she needed me the most. She also accused me of being selfish and not caring about her well-being. I haven't spoken to her since that conversation, and she hasn't reached out either. My parents think I'm in the right and that I've already done enough for her, but some of my friends think I should have helped her this one last time because she's family and clearly in distress. I know that if I help her again, I'll be enabling her behavior, but I can't help but feel guilty. Megan's always been my little sister, and part of me wants to help her, even though I know it's not the best decision. So, AITA for refusing to pay my sister's bills after she blew all her money on unnecessary purchases. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more awesome videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. Thanks for your support. AITA for telling my friend she can't stay at my house after she disrespected my roommates. I, 26F, live in a shared house with two of my best friends, Alice, 27F, and Emily, 28F. We've been living together for almost 3 years now, and for the most part, everything's been great. We all have our own rooms, and we split the rent and responsibilities like any normal roommates. We also spend a lot of time together and hang out regularly, but we do have our boundaries when it comes to space and personal time. So here's the issue. I have a friend, Claire, 25F, who I've known for about 5 years. We met through mutual friends, and although our relationship has always been a bit on and off, we've always gotten along. She's one of those people who can be really fun and entertaining at times, but can also be very inconsiderate without realizing it. Over the years, I've tried to be patient with her, but the past few months have tested my limits. A few weeks ago, Claire mentioned she was having some trouble with her living situation. She was renting an apartment with her boyfriend, but they were having issues, and she needed a place to stay for a while. She didn't want to go back to her parents' house because things were strained with them, and she didn't feel comfortable asking other friends for help. Claire had stayed with me before, but only for a night or two, never for a longer period, and it wasn't a huge problem. But this time, she was asking to crash at my place for an indefinite amount of time, potentially a few weeks. I talked to Alice and Emily about it because, while I was willing to help her out, I wanted to make sure everyone was on board. We all agreed that if Claire stayed, she needed to respect our shared space, and we'd set a few simple ground rules to make sure everything went smoothly. These rules included things like keeping noise to a reasonable level, respecting our cleaning schedule, and not bringing her boyfriend over constantly. We also agreed that if there were any issues, we'd talk it out and figure out a solution. When Claire moved in, things seemed fine at first. She was polite and tried to be considerate of our space. But after a few days, things started to change. Claire didn't follow the cleaning schedule, which is a big deal for us because we all have jobs and are busy during the week. We all take turns cleaning the common areas, and when someone doesn't do their part, it's frustrating. Claire would leave her dishes piled up in the kitchen for days and wouldn't clean up after herself when she used the bathroom. I mentioned it to her casually, thinking she might just be adjusting to living with us, but she seemed to brush it off and said she'd get to it later. The bigger issue, though, came when Claire started to bring her boyfriend, Tom, 30M, over more frequently. Alice and Emily and I had agreed that if she had visitors, they'd have to be reasonable and respectful of our space. Claire, however, started inviting Tom over every single evening. He'd come around at all hours, often unannounced, and stay until late at night. At first, I didn't mind too much, but became disruptive. Alice works from home, and Emily has early shifts at a retail job, so both of them were getting frustrated with the constant noise. One night, Claire and Tom were watching a movie in the living room, and they were being so loud that Alice had to leave her room and ask them to turn the volume down. Claire's response was something like, "It's just a movie. Why are you being so sensitive?" And Tom laughed it off, saying they weren't being that loud. I was already irritated at that point, but I didn't want to escalate things, so I talked to Claire about it the next day. I told her that, as a house, we needed to be considerate of each other's schedules, and that we couldn't have constant noise late into the night, especially when some of us had work early the next day. She apologized, but didn't seem to fully grasp the issue. Things continued to get worse. Claire started leaving her things all over the common areas, including in the kitchen and living room. I found her makeup scattered across the bathroom counter and her clothes on the couch. It was starting to feel like she was treating the house like it was her own personal space, without respecting the fact that we shared it. Alice and Emily were getting more and more annoyed, and I could see that tensions were building. I eventually reached a breaking point when Claire asked if Tom could stay the night for the weekend. I told her that, while I was okay with them hanging out, we needed to set clear boundaries, especially since we discussed keeping guest visits reasonable. She didn't take that well. She got defensive and said something along the lines of, "It's not like you guys are really using the space anyway. Why are you being so controlling?" That comment really rubbed me the wrong way. It felt like she was dismissing not just our house rules, but also our right to have quiet and privacy in the space we pay for. The final straw came when Claire ignored a direct request from Alice to keep the noise down one evening. Alice had politely asked Claire to lower her voice while she was on a work call, and Claire snapped back, saying, "I don't need to cater to you guys." Alice was upset, and I could see that she was done dealing with it. I also realized I was at my limit, and I needed to make a decision about whether I was going to keep tolerating Claire's behavior. I ended up talking to Claire privately, and I told her that I didn't think it was working for her to stay with us anymore. I explained that her behavior was affecting the dynamic of the house, and I needed her to respect the rules or find somewhere else to stay. Claire was taken aback and started getting really emotional. She said I was betraying her and that she thought I'd be more understanding since she was going through a tough time. She accused me of prioritizing my roommates over her friendship, and that really hurt. She also made a comment about how I should have just let her stay without making such a big deal out of it. I told her that I understood she was going through a difficult situation, but that didn't excuse her behavior, and that she needed to respect our space. I told her I wasn't kicking her out, but that I wasn't willing to keep living in an uncomfortable environment. She left that evening, saying she'd figure out other arrangements. But since then, she's been ignoring my messages and hasn't spoken to me. Now, I feel like our friendship is hanging by a thread, and I'm torn. On one hand, I know I did the right thing by setting boundaries. But on the other hand, I feel like I've hurt her, and that maybe I could have been more patient. Alice and Emily have backed me up, but I can't help but feel like maybe I could have handled it differently. I also miss the friendship we had before all of this. So, AITA for telling my friend she can't stay in my house after she disrespected my roommates. AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law stay at my house after she accused my husband of cheating. I, 28F, have been married to my husband, Jake, 30M, for about 3 years now. We've been together for a total of 5 years, and we've always had a good relationship, or at least that's what I thought. We don't have kids yet, and we both work full-time, but we make a point of spending quality time together. Jake has an older sister, Claire, 32F, who has never really been close to me, but she's always been nice enough when we've had family events or get-togethers. Jake has mentioned before that Claire can be a bit dramatic, and that their relationship has been rocky for years, but I never thought much of it. A few weeks ago, Claire reached out to Jake asking if she could stay with us for a few days because her apartment was being renovated. She didn't want to stay in a hotel, and since we have the space, Jake said it would be no problem. I wasn't thrilled about it because I'm very particular about house guests. I like having my space, and I wasn't sure how things would go with Claire, but I agreed because I didn't want to cause tension between Jake and his sister. When Claire came to stay, things started off okay, but it quickly became clear that we weren't going to have the easiest time with her. She didn't respect our house rules, she would leave her things all over the place, and she constantly complained about her furniture, food, and basically everything. I tried to be polite, but it was hard. I work from home, and having Claire around all the time felt like a huge distraction. She'd wander into my office and interrupt my meetings, asking me for things, and I couldn't focus. I talked to Jake about it a few times, but he told me to just be patient and that she was going through a tough time with her apartment. Then, last week, everything took a turn. I was working from home when I got a message from Claire asking if she could have a private conversation with me. I was in the middle of a conference call, so I told her I'd speak with her afterward. About an hour later, she knocked on my office door and came in without waiting for me to respond. I was annoyed, but I let her in anyway. She sat down and immediately started talking about how she needed to tell me something important and that it was about my husband. I was already confused and a little on edge. I asked her what she meant, and she told me that she had caught Jake with another woman. My heart dropped. She said she saw him at a cafe with a woman who was way too touchy-feely with him, and that it looked like they were more than friends. I was shocked. I asked her when this happened, and she said it was the weekend before. Now, I trust Jake, and I've never had any reason to doubt him. We don't have any trust issues, so this whole thing seemed like a huge misunderstanding. But Claire was insistent. She said, "I know what I saw, and you deserve to know the truth." She kept pushing me to confront Jake, telling me that I shouldn't let him get away with cheating on me. I was in complete shock and didn't know how to respond. I thanked her for her concern, but I told her I needed to talk to Jake myself before making any assumptions. After she left, I immediately called Jake and asked if he had gone to a cafe the previous weekend. He said yes, but only to grab coffee with a colleague from work. He explained that the woman Claire saw him with was a work colleague who was going through a rough time. He was just offering her a shoulder to lean on, nothing more. He assured me that nothing inappropriate had happened. I believed Jake, but at the same time, I was so shaken by Claire's accusation. It seemed out of character for her to make something like that up, but also didn't add up that Jake would cheat on me. I decided to let it go for the time being, but the next few days were incredibly tense. Claire was still staying with us, but I started avoiding her. I didn't want to start any fights, but I also didn't trust her anymore. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to cause drama. A few days later, Claire approached me again, but this time, she was acting like nothing had happened. She tried to make small talk, but I couldn't bring myself to engage with her the same way. I was still processing everything, and I wasn't sure if I could trust her anymore. The tipping point came when Jake and I were out running errands, and when we returned, Claire was gone. There was a note on the kitchen counter saying that she had taken a few days off to clear her head. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I started noticing some of her things were missing. Her toiletries, clothes, and a few other personal items. It hit me that she had left abruptly, and I didn't know why. I tried reaching out to her, but she didn't respond to any of my texts or calls. It was strange, and I was getting frustrated. Eventually, I asked Jake if he knew what was going on, and he said that Claire had been acting weird and that he didn't know where she went either. I was really upset. I didn't like the way she had left without any explanation, and I definitely didn't like how she had made me question my marriage. After a week of no contact, Claire finally reached out to me, but it wasn't to apologize. Instead, she accused me of siding with a cheater and claimed that I was too blind to see the truth. She told me that she had been trying to protect me and that I was being too naive to believe Jake. At this point, I'd had enough. I told her that I didn't appreciate how she had come into my home, stirred up unnecessary drama, and then left without any explanation. I also told her that if she couldn't respect my marriage, she wasn't welcome in my home anymore. She immediately blew up, saying that I was ruining the family and that I was being overly sensitive. She also said I was being disloyal to her for not believing her about Jake. I told her that I wasn't going to continue dealing with her drama and that she needed to stay away for good. Jake was furious with me for telling her to stay away. He said I was being too harsh and that I shouldn't have shut her out. He also mentioned that Claire had been going through a lot and that I should have been more understanding. I tried to explain that I was protecting myself and my marriage, but he seemed upset that I wasn't willing to make up with his sister. Now, he's barely speaking to me, and I feel like I'm being punished for standing my ground. So, AITA for refusing to let Claire stay at our house again, and for cutting her off after what happened. AITA for refusing to lend my car to my sister after she wrecked it before. I, 29M, have a pretty good relationship with my family, but things took a serious turn a couple of months ago, and I'm still not sure if I'm in the wrong here. I have a younger sister, Jenny, 25F, who has always been a little reckless with things, whether it's her personal life or, more notably, with anything she borrows. I've always been the one to help her out when she needs it, but this time I'm seriously questioning whether I should have done that. So, a few months ago, Jenny came to me asking to borrow my car. Now, let me give some context. I've got a pretty nice car that I've saved up for years to afford. It's not brand new or anything, but it's reliable and has a lot of sentimental value to me. It's my baby, so I take really good care of it. I always make sure to get it serviced, keep it clean, and take extra care when driving it. I've always been upfront with my family about how much I value my car, and they've respected that. When Jenny asked to borrow it, she had an excuse that seemed reasonable at the time. She'd been having some issues with her car, which was old and kept breaking down, and she needed to drive to a job interview in another city. She told me she'd only need it for the day and would return it in perfect condition. She even promised that she'd be careful and take care of it like it was her own. I hesitated, but agreed because, honestly, I wanted to be a good brother and help her out. I asked her to be careful with it, and she promised she'd treat it with respect. After talking it over, I figured it was just a one-time thing, and she seemed genuinely responsible about it. The day came when she borrowed the car. I wished her luck with the interview, and she left, saying she'd be back in the evening. I went about my day, thinking everything was fine. It wasn't until about 9 p.m. that I got a text from her. The message said, "Hey, I'm really sorry, but I got into a small accident. It's not too bad, but the car's going to need some repairs. I'll pay for everything, but I just wanted to let you know." I instantly felt a pit in my stomach. I called her immediately to get more details. She explained that she had been driving on the highway when a car in front of her slammed on its brakes. She didn't have enough time to react and ended up rear-ending them. According to her, the other driver was fine, and their car wasn't damaged too badly, but mine had significant front-end damage. She told me that the damage wasn't her fault because the other car stopped suddenly, but she admitted that she hadn't been paying attention enough and hadn't kept enough space between her car and the one in front. I was furious. I asked her why she hadn't been more careful with my car, especially after I'd asked her to treat it with respect. She kept insisting that it wasn't entirely her fault, that it was a sudden situation, and she didn't know what she could have done. She told me she'd pay for the repairs and that she'd deal with the insurance. I told her I need to see the car before I made any decisions. When I went to see the car, it was worse than I expected. The front end was a mess, crushed bumper, broken headlights, and the hood was bent in a way that looked like it might never be the same. I was upset, but I tried to remain calm. Jenny, on the other hand, was acting strangely nonchalant about it. She seemed to think it wasn't a big deal, which made me even more frustrated. I spent the next few days trying to figure out how much the repairs were going to cost. After getting a few estimates, I found out it was going to be over $5,000 to fix the car. To make matters worse, Jenny hadn't even gotten the insurance involved properly, so I had to deal with the aftermath myself. This is where I start to wonder if I was in the wrong. My family started getting involved. My parents told me that I should just let it go, that accidents happen, and that the important thing was that Jenny was okay. They even suggested that I should just be grateful she was willing to pay for the repairs. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt like this wasn't just about the money. I was angry that Jenny had treated my car so carelessly. It wasn't just the financial damage. It was the fact that she seemed to have no real understanding of how much that car meant to me. It felt like she took my generosity for granted. She didn't seem to be as upset about it as I was. It felt like she didn't realize how big of a deal this was. I started to feel like I'd been taken advantage of. I've always been the one to help out my family, but at what point do I stop letting them walk all over me? After everything that happened, I decided that I wouldn't be lending her my car again. In fact, I told her that I didn't think she should drive my car in the future, even if she needed it, because I just couldn't trust her with it anymore. Now, my family is upset with me. They say I'm being too harsh on Jenny and that I'm overreacting. They think I should just forgive her because it was an accident, but I don't feel like I can. I'm still angry, and every time I think about it, I get upset all over again. I don't know if I'm just being petty or if I'm justified in feeling this way. I want to know if I'm being unreasonable. Was I right to refuse to lend her my car again? Or am I just holding on to this grudge too tightly? AITA for not wanting to lend her my car again after everything that happened? AITA for refusing to babysit my niece because of my sister's parenting choices? I, 30F, have a younger sister, Emma, 27F, who has a 2-year-old daughter, Lily. I love being an aunt, and I enjoy spending time with Lily when I can, but lately, I've started to feel uncomfortable with some of the things my sister is doing as a parent. And now, my refusal to babysit her is causing a lot of tension between us. To give some background, Emma and I have always had a close relationship, but we've definitely had our differences, especially when it comes to parenting. I don't have any children of my own yet, but I've spent a lot of time around kids and have always been an active part of their lives, whether it's volunteering, helping out with my cousins, or just general knowledge. I don't think I'm an expert, but I do have my own set of values when it comes to how children should be raised. A few months ago, Emma and her husband, Matt, started asking me if I could help babysit Lily more often, since both of them work full-time. At first, I didn't mind too much, and I agreed to watch Lily a few times a week. But after a while, I started noticing a few things that were really starting to get under my skin. First, Emma has very little structure for Lily's daily routine. There's no set time for meals, naps, or even bedtime. Lily often goes to bed really late, like 10 p.m., which I think is way too late for a toddler. Emma doesn't seem to care about her sleep schedule, and I've seen how cranky and overtired Lily can get the next day. But Emma brushes it off as if it's no big deal. Second, Emma has a very relaxed approach to discipline. She rarely sets any real boundaries with Lily. If Lily throws a tantrum or doesn't want to do something, Emma just gives in. For example, if Lily doesn't want to eat her dinner, Emma will just let her skip it and give her snacks instead. I've told her a few times that this is not helping her daughter learn about consequences, but Emma doesn't seem to care and always responds with, she'll eat when she's hungry, or it's just a phase. But to me, it feels like she's enabling bad behavior, and it's starting to worry me. The final straw for me came last week. Emma called me and asked if I could babysit for a few hours so she could run some errands. When I arrived, Lily was sitting in front of the TV, eating a sugary cereal and watching cartoons. I immediately asked Emma what her plan was for the day, and she said she had no specific plans, just that she wanted me to watch her while she went to the store. I offered to take Lily to the park or do a craft project with her, but Emma said Lily wouldn't be interested and that it wasn't worth the effort. I spent the next couple of hours trying to entertain Lily, who had no interest in anything other than the TV. I felt so uncomfortable seeing a toddler just zoned out in front of screen with no kind of educational playtime or even any interaction. Eventually, Emma came back, and I decided to bring up my concerns, particularly about Lily's screen time and lack of structure in her day. I tried to be gentle and just explain that I felt like she might be doing more harm than good by allowing Lily to just eat junk and watch TV all day. I wasn't telling her how to parent, but I was concerned about what I was witnessing. Emma got defensive immediately. She said I was being overly critical and judging her. She told me that it was her child and she knew what she was doing and that I should stop acting like I was some kind of expert just because I spent a few hours with kids here and there. She even accused me of trying to make her feel bad about her parenting, and I started to get the sense that she wasn't open to hearing what I had to say. Since then, things have been awkward between us. I've had to turn down a few requests to babysit because I just don't feel comfortable with how things are being handled at Emma's house. I love Lily dearly, but I don't think I can continue to support the way Emma is raising her. I've offered to help her look into more structured parenting methods or find a routine for Lily, but she's turned down every suggestion. Now, Emma is really upset with me. She says that I'm making her feel like a bad mom and that I'm putting too much pressure on her. She's told our parents that I'm being unreasonable and that I've been judging her every step of the way. She says I made her feel like she's failing, and that's the last thing she needs from me. Our parents are somewhat on her side, which is making me feel even worse. I just don't know what to do. I love Emma and Lily, but I feel like I can't keep watching Lily in an environment where I feel like she's not being treated in a way that I believe is healthy. I don't want to keep enabling bad habits, but I also don't want to lose my relationship with my sister over this. So, AITA for refusing to babysit my niece because of my sister's parenting choices. AITA for kicking my roommate out after she brought a guy home for the weekend and left me to deal with the mess. I, 25F, have been living with my roommate, Sarah, 26F, for about a year now. We've been friends since college and decided to move in together after we both graduated and found jobs in the same city. Things were fine at first, but recently, I started to feel like I'm being taken advantage of, and it all came to a head last weekend. Sarah has always been pretty social. She's the kind of person who loves to host parties, go out with friends, and have people over all the time. At first, I didn't mind. Honestly, I'm more of a homebody, so having her around to balance things out was nice. However, lately, it feels like she's been constantly having people over without regard for my own space and peace of mind. A couple of weeks ago, Sarah started seeing this guy, Ben, 27M. I've met him a few times, and while he's nice enough, I don't know him all that well. From what Sarah's told me, they've been casually dating, but I've noticed that he's been coming over a lot more recently. Every time he's over, I try to be accommodating, but honestly, I've started feeling like I don't have much of a say in the situation. It's not that I don't want her to have a boyfriend or see him, but she's been getting a little inconsiderate about it. Last weekend, Sarah asked me if it was okay if Ben stayed over for the weekend because his place was having renovations done. I told her that I didn't mind, but that I'd prefer if they kept it respectful and didn't take over the whole apartment. Sarah agreed, but it didn't go as smoothly as I hoped. On Friday night, I got home from work around 6 p.m. and immediately noticed that the apartment smelled like beer and fast food. There were clothes and empty bottles scattered around the living room. Sarah and Ben were sitting on the couch watching a movie, and there were dishes everywhere. I tried to keep my cool and went into my room to unpack, but I could hear them laughing and talking loudly just outside my door. It wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it was definitely disruptive, and it felt like they had taken over the whole apartment. I didn't want to make a scene, so I just stayed in my room for the rest of the night. The next day, things only got worse. I woke up late, hoping to have some peace and quiet on a Saturday morning. But when I walked into the kitchen to make breakfast, I found that it was a mess. Dishes from their late-night takeout were piled up in the sink, and there were empty cups and wrappers everywhere. Sarah and Ben were lounging around in the living room again, watching TV and acting like it was a normal Saturday morning. I confronted Sarah about the mess, and she just shrugged it off, saying, "Sorry, we were kind of busy last night. I'll clean it up later." I was already feeling pretty frustrated, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I cleaned up the kitchen myself and tried to go about my day. By Saturday night, I was getting pretty annoyed. Ben had stayed the whole day, and I hadn't really had any space to myself. I've always appreciated my downtime, and I didn't sign up to live with a constant stream of people in and out of the apartment. On top of that, the apartment was still a mess, and it was clear that Sarah wasn't going to clean up anytime soon. Around 9 p.m., I decided to go out for a while to get some space. I texted Sarah and said that I was going to grab a drink with a friend and would be back late. When I got home around midnight, the apartment was still chaotic. Ben was asleep on the couch, and Sarah was in her room. The mess from the weekend was still everywhere, and now it was even worse. I was really frustrated at this point, and I decided to confront Sarah about it again. When I knocked on her door, she immediately got defensive. I told her that I was feeling really uncomfortable with the situation. I explained that I understood she wanted to spend time with her boyfriend, but I felt like the apartment had become a wreck and that I had been pushed out of my own space. I told her I needed some boundaries, especially when it came to her guests. Sarah didn't take it well. She said I was being dramatic and that I should lighten up. She also accused me of being selfish for not wanting to accommodate her relationship. She told me that I was acting like she couldn't have a weekend with her boyfriend just because I didn't want to deal with a little mess. I tried to explain that it wasn't just about the mess, but about feeling like I had no control over my own living space. She said I was overreacting and that she had every right to have him over whenever she wanted. At this point, I was really fed up. I told Sarah that I was done with the situation and that she needed to figure things out. I wasn't comfortable with how things were going, and I felt like we needed to establish some clearer boundaries. I told her that I wanted Ben to leave, and that if she wasn't willing to respect my space and boundaries, I would have to reconsider our living arrangement. Sarah didn't take kindly to that. She got really upset and started yelling at me, calling me controlling and selfish. She said I was trying to ruin her relationship, and that I was being unreasonable. I told her that I wasn't asking for much, just a little respect and consideration for my space. She refused to acknowledge my concerns and kept insisting that I was the one in the wrong. In the end, I told Sarah that I couldn't live like this anymore, and I told her to either get Ben out of the apartment or I would be looking for a new place to live. After a few more heated words, she reluctantly agreed to have Ben leave, but the situation between us was incredibly tense. I spent the rest of the weekend in my room, and we barely spoke. The next day, Sarah packed up her stuff and left for a few days. She texted me later, saying that I was being unreasonable and that I had no right to kick her boyfriend out just because I didn't like the situation. She told me that if I couldn't deal with her having people over, I should move out. I've been thinking about it ever since, and now I'm wondering if I was in the wrong for kicking her out. AITA for telling my roommate to get her boyfriend out of the apartment and considering moving out if things don't change. AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law live with me after she got pregnant and asked me for help. I, 32F, have been married to my husband, Mike, 34M, for 4 years now. We don't have any kids of our own yet, but we've been considering it in the near future. Mike's family is large, and he has 2 sisters, Rachel, 28F, and Lauren, 25F. I've always gotten along well with them, but Rachel and I have had a somewhat rocky relationship over the years. She's the type of person who can be very demanding, always expecting others to prioritize her needs over everything else. About a month ago, Rachel came to us with some news. She's pregnant. At first, Mike and I were happy for her. It was unexpected, but not entirely a surprise. She had been in a fairly on and off relationship with her boyfriend, Jason, 30M, and they'd just moved in together. Rachel has always been a little impulsive, so I wasn't shocked when she told us she was pregnant, even though they hadn't been together for that long. A few days after the announcement, Rachel called me to ask if she could stay with us for a while. She said she needed a place to crash because her apartment was too small for the baby and that she wanted to save money before she figured out where to go next. At first, I was a bit taken aback, but I said I'd talk to Mike about it. We have a spacious home, and I knew we could offer her a room, so I figured it might be fine. But then the conversation took a turn. Rachel went on to tell me that she didn't just need a place to stay. She was planning to move in with us for an indefinite amount of time. She said she wasn't ready to deal with everything on her own, and since she was pregnant, she thought it would be a good idea to stay somewhere safe and supportive. She mentioned that Jason wasn't really in a position to help her right now, and she wasn't sure what their future would look like. So, she was hoping to live with us until she could figure things out. At that point, I felt like she was asking for more than I could offer. Mike and I don't have children yet, and we've always talked about having our own space when we do decide to start a family. We've also worked hard to maintain a certain level of privacy and peace in our home, and the thought of suddenly having a third person live with us for an indefinite period was overwhelming. I told Rachel that I wasn't sure it was a good idea for her to stay with us long term. I explained that Mike and I had been talking about starting a family ourselves, and that we needed to keep some space for ourselves to figure things out. I also mentioned that living with us for a long time could create tension, especially since our home wasn't designed to accommodate someone long-term. I suggested she look into finding an apartment or staying with other family members in the meantime. Rachel wasn't happy with my response. She became very upset and accused me of being unsupportive. She said that since we had the space, it shouldn't be a big deal to let her stay for a while. She even pointed out that she had helped me when I was struggling with some personal issues a couple of years ago, and now it was my turn to return the favor. She went on to say that I was being selfish and that if I really cared about her, I would make room for her and the baby. I tried to explain that I did care about her and wanted to help, but that it wasn't just about having the space. It was also about maintaining boundaries. I explained that this wasn't just a small favor. Living together would require a huge shift in how we live our daily lives, and it wasn't something I was comfortable with at this stage. I also told her that Mike and I were not in a position to take on the responsibility of her living with us indefinitely. We had a lot of things to think about as a couple, and adding a third person, especially someone who wasn't going to be financially independent, was not something we could manage. Rachel didn't take my response well. She accused me of being judgmental and called me cold-hearted. She said I was acting like she was a burden and that it was cruel to expect her to go through pregnancy without family support. She said she didn't have anywhere else to turn, and I was essentially abandoning her. She told me that she didn't expect me to do everything for her, but at the very least, I should be willing to give her a roof over her head. Her tone became increasingly hostile as she made it clear that she felt completely unsupported by me. I was devastated. I had always tried to be there for Rachel, but it felt like she wasn't hearing me at all. I wasn't saying I wouldn't help. I just didn't think living together was the right solution. The conversation ended with her saying, "Fine, I'll figure out myself," but it's been really awkward between us since then. She's barely spoken to me, and when I reach out, she responds coldly. It's clear that she's hurt, and I feel guilty, but I also feel like I've done the right thing for my marriage and for my own mental health. Now, Mike and I are starting to get some pushback from other family members. His parents, in particular, are upset that I didn't offer to help Rachel more. They think I should have been more accommodating, especially since Rachel is pregnant and needs help. They've told me I'm being too harsh, and that I should have stepped up like a good sister-in-law would have. They've also implied that Mike should have made more of an effort to convince me to say yes, which only adds to the tension. I feel like I'm stuck between my own boundaries and the expectations of my husband's family. I understand that Rachel is going through a lot right now, but I don't feel like I'm wrong for wanting to maintain my own space and not take on the responsibility of someone else's life for an indefinite period of time. But I'm also starting to wonder if I should have just said yes, even if it meant making some personal sacrifices. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law live with me after she got pregnant and asked me for help. AITA for telling my best friend that she can't come to my birthday party after she insisted on bringing her new boyfriend, who I don't like. So I, 26F, have a best friend, Lucy, 25F, who I've known since high school. We've been through a lot together, college, breakups, family stuff, you name it. She's one of the people I trust the most, and I've always considered her to be more like a sister than a friend. We've had our ups and downs over the years, but we've always managed to work through things, and I've always been there for her. Now, let me give you a little background on the situation. Lucy recently started dating this guy, Greg, 29M. I didn't really think much of him at first. They met a few months ago, and at first, I was happy for her because she seemed really excited. But over time, I've noticed a few things about Greg that have really rubbed me the wrong way, and I've kept my concerns to myself because I didn't want to come off as judgmental or controlling. However, as time went on, I couldn't ignore the way he treated her and the way he treated other people. He's kind of a jerk. He has a very condescending attitude, especially when he's talking to people he doesn't know well. He makes a lot of jokes at the expense of others, and it just doesn't sit right with me. I've heard him make some pretty insensitive comments about things like mental health and body image, which really bothered me. But the thing that really made me uncomfortable was the way he treated Lucy when she had a rough day or was upset. He'd kind of brush her off, telling her to just get over it or don't be so dramatic. I've never seen him show any real empathy or concern for her emotions, and that's when I started getting worried. When I first started noticing all of this, I tried talking to Lucy about it. I didn't want to go too hard on Greg, so I started with something more general like, hey, I've noticed that Greg can be a little dismissive sometimes. Is everything okay? I didn't want to attack her boyfriend, but I wanted her to know that I was looking out for her. She brushed me off at first, telling me that I was overreacting and that I didn't know him like she did. I let it go, thinking maybe I was just being too sensitive. But over the last couple of weeks, Greg's behavior has gotten worse. He started to make more comments about our friends, about how they're so basic or too soft for his taste. He even made a comment about one of my other friends, Sarah, saying she was too fat to wear that dress at a party a few weeks ago. I was horrified. Sarah is one of the sweetest, most confident people I know, and to hear someone say that about her, especially someone who barely knows her, made me furious. When I confronted Lucy about it, she just said, well, Greg is kind of blunt, but he's just joking. Don't take it so seriously. That was the final straw for me. I couldn't let it slide anymore. I didn't want to see her getting hurt or let Greg continue to treat her like this. So, here's where things get tricky. My birthday is coming up, and I've been planning a party for a few weeks now. It's a low-key gathering with close friends, and I'm really excited about it. I invited Lucy, of course, and when I mentioned the party to her, she immediately said she wanted to bring Greg. Now, I know that she's probably in the honeymoon phase of their relationship, but I wasn't thrilled at the idea of having him there. I wasn't ready to have him at my celebration when I didn't even like him, and I didn't think he would get along with my friends. I also didn't want him making any more rude comments or making anyone feel uncomfortable. I told Lucy that I wasn't sure if I wanted Greg to come to the party. I tried to be polite about it, saying, I'm just not sure if he'll vibe with everyone, and I really want it to be a good time for all of us. I thought she'd understand, but she got really upset and insisted that Greg should be invited because he's my boyfriend and I don't want to leave him out. I explained that I just wasn't comfortable with it, but she kept pushing. She started saying that I was being unfair and that I shouldn't be judging Greg just because I don't like him. She even accused me of trying to control who she dates, which was never my intention. At this point, I told her that if she was going to bring Greg, then she couldn't come to the party. I know that sounds harsh, but I didn't want to feel like I had to tolerate him at my own celebration. I explained that I didn't feel comfortable having someone at my party who was rude and disrespectful to my friends. I also told her that I'd never ask her to choose between me and Greg, but if she wanted to bring him, I'd rather she not come at all. I didn't want the drama, and I didn't want to be put in a position where I had to deal with tension on my birthday. She was furious. She called me controlling, selfish, and unreasonable. She told me I was acting like I was better than Greg, and that I was trying to sabotage her happiness. She said that if I couldn't accept Greg, then I clearly didn't respect her. We haven't spoken since then, and I'm feeling really conflicted. I've been friends with Lucy for years, and I don't want to lose her over this. But at the same time, I feel like I'm just standing up for my own boundaries and my own peace of mind. I don't want to have to tolerate bad behavior from her boyfriend, especially when I feel like I'm being ignored and dismissed. I feel like I have every right to want a drama-free birthday, but I also don't want to alienate my best friend. So, AITA for telling my best friend she can't come to my birthday party if she insists on bringing her boyfriend, who I don't like. Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to help my brother financially after he trashed my car. I, 29F, have a younger brother, Jake, 25M, who has always been a bit irresponsible with money and decision-making. Our family is pretty close, and we've always been there for each other when things get tough. I've helped Jake out a few times before, lending him money when he was short on rent or needed help paying off his car. Every time, I told him it was a one-time thing, and every time, he swore he'd change and start being more responsible. But, as you can probably guess, that hasn't happened. Recently, things took a major turn, and I'm wondering if I went too far by refusing to help him this time. A couple of months ago, Jake asked if he could borrow my car for a weekend trip. He doesn't have his own car at the moment because he crashes a few months back and hasn't bothered to fix it, mostly because he can't afford the repairs. At first, I hesitated because I love my car and I'm very protective of it. But I figured I could trust him, and I also didn't want to be the overbearing sister who didn't support her brother when he asked for a favor. I set some ground rules before I lent it to him. I made it clear that the car had to be returned in the same condition, that he needed to take care of it, and that I'd be upset if anything happened to it. He agreed and promised he'd be careful. Fast forward to the weekend. I didn't hear from him all day Saturday, and when I reached out on Sunday evening to check in, I got a text saying, "Hey, I got into a small accident. Everything's fine, but I'm dealing with it right now. I'll explain more later." Naturally, I freaked out. I immediately called him, and he picked up, sounding pretty calm. He told me that he had run into a ditch and scratched the side of my car pretty badly. When I asked if he was okay, he just brushed it off, saying that he was fine but that the car had some damage. I told him I needed to see the car myself before I could make any judgments. When I arrived at the location where he parked the car, I was shocked. The side of my car was dented, scratched, and had clear signs of the accident. The rearview mirror was cracked, and there was even a flat tire. I asked Jake what exactly had happened, and he told me that he was driving too fast on a gravel road, lost control, and slid into the ditch. He admitted that he hadn't been wearing his seatbelt when it happened, but that he was lucky he wasn't hurt. I was livid. The car wasn't just scratched. There was significant damage, and the repairs would cost a few $1,000s. Jake apologized, but it was clear to me that he didn't fully understand the severity of what had happened. I had just bought this car a year ago, and I had taken great care of it. Now, it was going to take a long time to repair. I immediately told him that I would need him to cover the repair costs. He said that he didn't have the money, and that he was really sorry for what had happened. He told me that he would pay me back once he got his paycheck, but I could tell he wasn't taking full responsibility for the situation. I ended up paying for the repairs out of my own pocket. I was furious at Jake, but I also felt like I couldn't just leave him hanging, especially when our family was going to find out. I didn't want to have to deal with the drama of explaining why my brother was irresponsible with my car, but I told him that he needed to pay me back in full as soon as he could. A few weeks passed, and I didn't hear anything about repayment. I sent him a text reminding him that I expected the money for the repairs. He responded, saying that he was working on it, but that things had been tight lately. I knew that meant he wasn't going to pay me back anytime soon. 1 month after the accident, I had enough. I told Jake that if he didn't pay me back within the next week, I would stop helping him with anything financial in the future. I made it clear that I wasn't going to keep bailing him out every time he made a bad decision. Jake got defensive and said that I was being unfair. He told me that I knew he didn't have the money and that he was trying his best. He said I should have been more understanding since he was going through a lot and that it wasn't his fault the car was damaged. He even threw in the fact that it wasn't like he meant to wreck my car. I felt like he was trying to manipulate me into feeling bad for him, but I stuck to my guns. A couple of days later, I went to visit our parents, and Jake was there too. He started talking to me about the situation, and our parents quickly got involved. He told them about the accident, and of course, they were sympathetic towards him. They said that I should just let it go and not worry about the money because Jake was trying his best. They also mentioned how it wasn't really his fault that he crashed the car. I told them that I wasn't asking for sympathy. I was asking for accountability. I said that Jake had agreed to take care of my car, and now he was dodging his responsibility. I also told them that I was not going to help him financially anymore if he couldn't show any effort to pay me back or take responsibility for his actions. They seemed to agree with me, but Jake started acting like I was the one being unreasonable. After that conversation, Jake started pulling away from me. He stopped responding to my texts and barely spoke to me when we were around family. I could tell he was upset, but I wasn't going to back down. I've helped him out countless times, and every time he's promised to change, but it's always the same cycle. I've reached a point where I'm tired of being the one to pick up the pieces when he makes poor decisions. A few weeks later, I ran into Jake at a family gathering, and he asked if I was still mad at him. I told him that I wasn't mad, but I was disappointed. I said that if he didn't take responsibility for his actions, I couldn't keep lending him money or helping him out anymore. He apologized again, but I didn't feel like it was sincere. He didn't offer to pay me back for the car repairs, and I still haven't seen a dime from him. I've been thinking a lot about this situation, and I'm starting to wonder if I've gone too far. My parents think I should have let it go and not caused so much tension between us. But I feel like Jake will never learn if there are no consequences for his actions. So, AITA for refusing to help my brother financially after he trashed my car. I didn't pay me back for the repairs. AITA for refusing to let my mom attend my graduation after she started a fight with my boyfriend at the family dinner. I, 22F, am about to graduate from college, and I've been looking forward to it for years. It's not just the degree itself, but the sense of achievement after all the late nights, studying, and sacrifices I've made. This graduation is something that means a lot to me, and I want it to be a day of celebration and happiness, surrounded by the people I love and care about. However, things have been complicated due to my mom's behavior. My mom, 50s, and I have always had a somewhat strained relationship. She's not a terrible person, but she can be controlling, overbearing, and sometimes downright rude. I've spent a lot of my life trying to please her, but as I've gotten older, I've started setting boundaries and being more vocal about what I need. My mom, unfortunately, hasn't taken well to this shift. She doesn't understand that I am my own person now and that I want to make my own decisions. I've tried to talk to her about it, but she usually dismisses my feelings or makes me feel guilty for speaking up. One of the biggest sources of tension between us is my boyfriend, Adam, 24M. Adam and I have been dating for over a year now, and he's been nothing but supportive and kind to me. We met through a mutual friend, and he's someone I can truly see a future with. My mom, however, is not a fan of him. She's never really given him a chance, and it's been clear from the start that she doesn't approve of our relationship. She thinks he's too relaxed, and that he doesn't have his life together the way she'd like him to. She's always made little comments about how he doesn't look like the type of person who could offer me stability, and it's obvious that she doesn't think he's good enough for me. I've tried to talk to her about it multiple times, explaining that I love Adam for who he is and that I don't need her approval to be happy. But my mom just can't seem to let it go. For the most part, I've learned to ignore her comments and not let them affect my relationship. Adam and I have a strong bond, and we've worked through the negativity that's come from her side. However, things came to a head at the family dinner just a few days ago. I invited my parents and a few extended family members to celebrate my graduation before the big ceremony. Adam was invited as well, of course. It wasn't anything fancy, just a casual dinner at a local restaurant, but I wanted to mark the occasion with the people I care about. I should have known better, though. As soon as Adam and I arrived, my mom's mood was noticeably cold. I tried to brush it off, but it was hard to ignore the icy stares she kept giving him. Throughout the dinner, she made passive-aggressive comments about how I should be with someone more ambitious and serious, constantly comparing Adam to her idea of what a successful partner should be. Adam, being the polite person he is, smiled through it, but I could tell he was starting to get uncomfortable. I kept trying to redirect the conversation, but my mom was relentless. Finally, after the main course, things exploded. Adam made a comment about how he thought it was a great milestone for me and how proud he was of my accomplishments. My mom immediately jumped in, saying, "Well, it's not just about the degree. It's about making sure you're with someone who can actually help you achieve your potential, not just someone who can make you feel good in the moment. Adam's face fell. He looked taken aback, and I could feel the tension in the room rising. I tried to defuse the situation by telling my mom that Adam had nothing to do with my success. I've worked hard for everything I've achieved, and I don't need anyone to validate that for me. But my mom wasn't having it. She kept going, telling me that Adam wasn't serious enough for me and that I deserved someone who could actually support my career goals. At this point, Adam looked genuinely upset, and I could see his patience running thin. He calmly said, "With all due respect, I don't think it's fair for you to judge me based on what you think I can offer. I'm doing my best to support your daughter, and if that's not enough for you, then maybe we need to have a bigger conversation." That set my mom off. She stood up from the table and started yelling about how she wasn't going to stand by and watch me throw my future away for someone who couldn't provide for me. She accused me of being blinded by love and made a huge scene in front of the entire restaurant. I was mortified. My aunt and cousins tried to calm her down, but she was in full meltdown mode. I was absolutely furious at this point. This wasn't the first time my mom had embarrassed me, but it was definitely the worst. I stood up, told my mom that I was done with this conversation, and that she had ruined the evening for me. I told her that if she couldn't respect my relationship and my choices, she wasn't welcome at my graduation ceremony. She looked shocked and hurt, but I didn't feel bad. I was done with her behavior. My mom left the dinner shortly after, still shouting at me, but I didn't care anymore. Since then, my family has been divided. Some of my relatives are on my side, saying that my mom was out of line and that I had every right to stand up for myself. Others think I went too far and that I should have let her be at my graduation, even if she's difficult. My dad has been silent on the matter, but I can tell he's upset with both me and my mom for the way things went down. Now, I'm stuck in this weird limbo. My graduation is coming up, and I've made it clear to my mom that if she can't treat Adam with respect and put aside her issues with him, she's not welcome. She's begged me to reconsider, saying that she'll behave at the ceremony, but I'm not sure if I can trust her. Adam has been incredibly supportive and has told me that whatever I decide, he's okay with it, but I'm really torn. So, AITA for refusing to let my mom attend my graduation after she started a fight with my boyfriend at the family dinner. AITA for not inviting my sister to my birthday party after she ruined my last one. I, 28M, have a sister, Kate, 32F, who I've had a complicated relationship with over the years. Growing up, we were close, but as we got older, things started to shift. Kate is very dramatic, and I've always felt like I'm walking on eggshells around her. We don't always see eye to eye, and I've always been the one trying to keep the peace. For context, we both have different social circles, and our values are a bit different, but we've managed to get along for the most part. A few years ago, I had a birthday party, and it ended up being a complete disaster because of Kate. I had planned a pretty low-key gathering with my friends and some family. Nothing extravagant, just a small dinner at my place, a few drinks, and some casual games. I specifically told Kate that I wanted it to be chill and that I didn't want any drama. She promised she'd behave, but that promise didn't last long. About halfway through the evening, Kate started making snide comments to some of my friends. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but then I realized she was genuinely trying to stir the pot. She made a few passive-aggressive remarks about my friends' careers and their relationships, and she even made fun of the food I had ordered, calling it basic and boring. It got awkward fast. One of my friends called her out on her behavior, and she just shrugged it off, making the situation worse. I had to step in, trying to defuse the tension, but Kate wasn't having it. She stormed out of the apartment, making a dramatic exit, and left me to clean up the mess she had caused. It was humiliating. I had invited her to what was supposed to be a fun, relaxed night with people I cared about, and she turned it into a disaster. I tried to reach out to her the next day, but she didn't apologize. Instead, she acted like I was the one in the wrong for not standing up for her when my friends didn't like her comments. It didn't sit well with me, and I started to distance myself from her a bit. Since that birthday, I've had a hard time trusting her around my friends, and I've been careful with how much I involve her in my personal life. I didn't want a repeat of what happened, and I made a mental note to never have another gathering with her there unless I was sure it was going to go smoothly. Now, my birthday is coming up again, and I'm planning something similar, just a small get-together with close friends and family. I've been thinking a lot about Kate and whether or not I should invite her. On one hand, she's my sister, and I don't want to seem like I'm holding a grudge. On the other hand, I'm still angry about what happened at my last birthday and don't want to deal with the stress of her ruining this one too. So, after a lot of consideration, I made the decision not to invite her. I sent out the invites, and Kate immediately called me, asking if she was invited. I told her no, and she was immediately upset, asking me why. I told her the truth. I didn't want to risk a repeat of last time, and I didn't feel comfortable with her being there after the way she acted at my previous birthday. She got defensive and said that I was being petty and that it was just a joke back then, but I didn't find it funny. She accused me of holding on to a grudge, and it became clear that she didn't really understand why I was upset. She went off on me, saying I was being ridiculous and overdramatic about something that happened years ago. She told me I was acting like a child for not forgiving her and that I was punishing her for something she already apologized for. I told her that she hadn't apologized, and in fact, she'd barely acknowledged the issue. She said I was being too sensitive and that I needed to move on. I tried to explain that it wasn't just about the comments, but about the fact that I didn't feel respected or valued, and I didn't want to risk that happening again. She didn't take it well, and the conversation ended with her telling me I was breaking up our family and that I'd regret it. She's been sending me passive-aggressive texts ever since, calling me a drama queen and saying I'll be sorry when I don't have her on my side. My parents and some of my extended family have also weighed in, telling me I'm being too hard on Kate and that I should let it go. They think I'm overreacting and that I should just invite her because, in their words, she's family and it's not that big of a deal. They say I'm being childish for holding on to something that happened so long ago and that I should focus on having a good time. On the other hand, my friends who were at that disastrous birthday party have been supportive of my decision. They've told me they understand why I'm upset and that they wouldn't want Kate around either if they were in my position. They've been really kind about it, saying they'll help me have a great birthday regardless of what happens. But here's the thing. I don't want to feel like I'm being unfair or vindictive. I've tried to be the bigger person, and I've tried to include her in my life, but every time I do, it's like she doesn't care or doesn't take my feelings seriously. It feels like she expects me to just forget what happened and pretend everything's fine, but I'm not willing to do that. Now, I'm second-guessing my decision. Should I have just invited her for the sake of family peace? Am I being too harsh? Or is it okay for me to set boundaries with her after how she treated me on my last birthday? AITA for not inviting my sister to my birthday party after she ruined my last one? AITA for not letting my friend move in with me after she lost her job and is struggling financially? I, 30M, have a close friend, Sarah, 29F, who I've known since high school. We've been through a lot together, and even though we've both had our ups and downs over the years, we've always been there for each other. However, recently, things have gotten a bit complicated, and now I'm not sure if I've made the right decision or if I'm being too harsh. To give you some context, Sarah lost her job about 2 months ago. She worked in marketing at a mid-sized company, but they went through some budget cuts, and she was laid off. Ever since then, she's been really struggling. She hasn't been able to find a new job yet, and she's been living off her savings, which are now pretty much gone. She reached out to me a couple of weeks ago, asking if she could stay with me for a while because she couldn't afford rent anymore and was starting to get behind on bills. At first, I felt really bad for her. She's always been a good friend to me, and I've helped her out in the past when she needed a hand. I really wanted to help her, but at the same time, I was hesitant. I live in a small apartment by myself, and while I have a spare room, it's not exactly a huge space. I also have a pretty structured routine and value my privacy, and I wasn't sure how it would affect that. But after talking to her and hearing how desperate she was, I agreed to let her move in temporarily. I set some ground rules before she arrived. I made it clear that I wasn't in a position to support her financially, and that she'd need to figure out her own job situation as soon as possible. I also told her that I wasn't comfortable with her staying for more than a couple of months, just until she got back on her feet. She agreed to all of this, and we both thought it would be a good arrangement. The first couple of weeks were fine. She was respectful of the space and followed the house rules I set. She kept to herself during the day while I was at work, and she'd cook us dinner occasionally. We'd hang out in the evenings, watch movies, talk about old times. Things felt relatively normal. But then, things started to change. After a while, it became clear that Sarah wasn't really putting much effort into finding a new job. She'd applied to a few places here and there, but it didn't seem like she was seriously committed to the process. Instead, she started spending most of her days at home, watching TV or scrolling through social media. At first, I didn't say anything, but after a few weeks, I started to feel uncomfortable. She wasn't contributing to the household at all. I had told her she could stay with me rent-free for a short time, but at the very least, I expected her to help out around the house, whether it was doing the dishes, cleaning, or even just pitching in on groceries. But she wasn't doing any of that. I would come home to a messy kitchen, dishes piling up, and her taking no initiative to clean up after herself. I started having to remind her every few days to do basic chores, but it was like pulling teeth. Things reached a breaking point when she had a small party at the apartment without asking me first. I came home one evening after a long day at work to find a group of people hanging out in the living room, eating pizza, and drinking wine. I was caught off guard and immediately felt uncomfortable. I had a lot of personal stuff going on at the time, and the last thing I wanted was to come home to a chaotic situation. I pulled her aside and asked her why she hadn't mentioned the party beforehand. She apologized and said she didn't think it would be a big deal. But honestly, I was pissed. I felt like my boundaries had been disrespected. I asked her to keep things low-key moving forward, and we had a conversation about the situation. She promised she'd be more mindful, but I started to notice other issues creeping up. She started leaving her things all over the apartment, clothes in the living room, bags in the hallway, and it started feeling like I was living in a shared space rather than my own home. I also began to feel like she wasn't really trying to improve her situation. She'd make excuses like, "I'm just waiting for the right opportunity," or "I'm not sure if this job is a good fit." It wasn't like she was lazy. It was more that she wasn't really putting in the effort or the urgency that I would expect someone in her position to have. Meanwhile, I was getting more and more stressed because I was the one supporting her, not financially but emotionally and by giving her a roof over her head. I also started to feel like I was taking on a lot more responsibility than I should have. A few weeks ago, I had a conversation with her and told her that she needed to step up. I explained that I couldn't keep living in this situation, that I needed her to help out more around the house and be more proactive in finding a job. She got defensive and said she was already feeling bad about the whole situation and that I didn't need to remind her. She also brought up how difficult it was to find a job in her field right now and how the pandemic had made everything harder. I understood all of that, but at the same time, I was starting to feel like I was being taken advantage of. Eventually, I had to set a hard deadline for her to either find a job or start contributing more to the household in a meaningful way. I told her that after 2 months, I couldn't continue with the arrangement and that she needed to either find a way to pay rent or move out. This was a hard conversation for me because I genuinely care about her, but I felt like I had given her enough time and space to figure things out. She didn't take it well. She was upset, saying that I was being selfish and that she needed my support, not more pressure. Now, we're at a point where she hasn't found a job yet and is still staying with me, but the tension between us has been building. I feel bad for her situation, but at the same time, I don't think I'm in the wrong for setting boundaries. It's hard because I don't want to lose her as a friend, but I also feel like I'm being taken for granted. My family thinks I'm being too harsh, but my friends are split. Some say I've been more than generous and that I'm not obligated to keep helping her if it's negatively impacting my own life. Others think I should be more patient and understanding, considering everything that's going on in the world right now. AITA for not letting her stay with me longer after she hasn't really done much to improve her situation? Or am I being too hard on her during a difficult time? AITA for not attending my best friend's graduation after she refused to change her wedding date? I, 29F, have been best friend with Hannah, 28F, for over 15 years. We met in high school and have been through a lot together. From college struggles to personal issues, We've always had each other's backs. That being said, our relationship has been tested over the years by various events and situations, but nothing has ever made me feel as conflicted as I do now. Hannah has always been someone who's extremely organized and has her life planned out. When she got engaged to her fiancé, Mark, 30M, last year, she immediately started planning their wedding, which was set for June 15th of this year. The wedding planning was going well, and she was excited about it. But then in March, I got the news that I had been accepted into a graduate program that I had been working toward for years. I was thrilled. This was something I had dreamed of for a long time, and the program was prestigious and competitive, so it felt like a huge accomplishment. I immediately called Hannah to tell her the news, and she was thrilled for me as well. But then, I found out that my graduation ceremony would be held on June 15th. I was initially unsure of how to bring this up with her because I knew it was her wedding day, but I had to tell her. So, I called her and let her know about the conflict. When I told Hannah about the overlap, her response was less than ideal. She didn't take the news well and immediately said that my graduation couldn't be that important if it was happening on the same day as her wedding. I was shocked. She was upset, but I tried to explain that this graduation had been years in the making for me, and I couldn't miss it. I told her that if she could possibly shift the wedding date by a few days, I would be there in a heartbeat. After all, she had months of planning ahead, and I was sure she could find a way to adjust. However, she told me that the wedding was already planned, vendors had been booked, and everything was set for that date, so it would be impossible to change it. I understood that things were set in motion, but I thought it was a reasonable request considering how important my graduation was to me. I offered to attend the wedding at a later time, to show up after the ceremony if it was necessary, but Hannah refused to hear any of it. She said that I should just prioritize her because she had waited so long for this day, and that family and friends should be there no matter what. At this point, I was frustrated and hurt. I wasn't asking for her to cancel her wedding. I was just asking for a small adjustment to the date, but she refused to even consider it. I didn't want to argue with her, so I left it at that and told her I'd have to miss the wedding due to the graduation. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but I felt like I didn't have a choice. Over the next few weeks, Hannah and I barely spoke. It was clear that she was upset, and she made a few passive-aggressive comments when we did talk. I noticed that she would bring up the wedding and say things like, "It's really disappointing that you can't make it," or "You must not care enough about me if you can't rearrange your plans." These comments started to wear on me. It wasn't that I didn't care about her. Of course, I cared deeply about her, but this was a significant milestone for me, too. The tension continued to build, and finally, a week before the wedding, Hannah confronted me. She said that I had chosen my graduation over her wedding, and that I was being selfish. She told me that she couldn't believe I would miss such an important event in her life for something that I could have easily rescheduled. She even said that she didn't think I was being a good friend by putting my own life ahead of hers. This was devastating to me. It was clear that she had no understanding of why this graduation meant so much to me. She made me feel like I was betraying her and our friendship. The whole situation became more complicated when other mutual friends started chiming in. I had received several messages from our friends who were attending the wedding, telling me that they couldn't believe I would miss it for something as small as a graduation. Some of them even implied that I was being inconsiderate of Hannah's feelings and that I should have just skipped the ceremony for one day. One friend even suggested that I could celebrate my graduation later, but that missing Hannah's wedding would be unforgivable. These comments made me feel like I was being painted as the villain in this situation. I spoke with Mike, my husband, about it, and he supported me in the decision not to attend. He told me that I couldn't let other people's expectations dictate my choices. He pointed out that I had worked incredibly hard for this graduation and that I should be proud of my achievements. While he sympathized with Hannah's feelings, he agreed that this was my moment and I shouldn't feel guilty for missing the wedding. Still, I'm feeling extremely torn. I want to support my best friend, but I also have to take into account my own achievements and my own life milestones. It doesn't feel fair that I'm being asked to choose between my lifelong friend and a significant milestone in my life. I don't know if I've handled this situation correctly or if I've been too selfish in not prioritizing her wedding. So, AITA for not attending my best friend's wedding after she refused to change the date of her wedding for my graduation. AITA for kicking my best friend out of my house after she made a racist comment about my neighbor. I, 27F, have a best friend, Lily, 28F, who I've known since high school. We've always had a close relationship, but lately, I've started to question how much I truly know about her. Lily and I are both city girls who grew up in an urban environment and are pretty used to being around a diverse group of people. However, during a recent incident, Lily made a racist comment about my neighbor, and now I'm wondering if I overreacted by kicking her out of my house. For some context, I live in a mixed-income neighborhood, and my neighbors are incredibly diverse. A lot of the people on my block are from different racial and ethnic backgrounds, and I've never had an issue with that. In fact, I love the diversity of my neighborhood. It's one of the reasons I moved here. One of my neighbors, Amina, 35F, is a black woman who I've gotten to know pretty well over the past couple of years. She's always been friendly, and we chat occasionally when we see each other. We don't hang out a lot, but we've helped each other with things like picking up packages or watching each other's pets while we're away. I've always respected Amina, and she's a solid neighbor. A few weeks ago, Lily came over to my house to spend the weekend. We've done this a lot over the years, and it's usually pretty laid back. Lily has stayed at my place on and off, so she's familiar with my neighborhood and the people who live nearby. On this particular weekend, I was having a small dinner party with a few friends, including Amina, who I invited since we've developed a friendly rapport. The night started off pretty normal, with everyone chatting, eating, and drinking. Lily and Amina hadn't spent much time together before, but they were cordial. At one point, the conversation shifted to discussing local businesses in the area. Amina mentioned a new cafe that had opened up nearby, saying it was owned by a woman from the local community. She mentioned how the cafe had a great vibe and that she loved supporting local businesses, especially ones that are black-owned. At this point, Lily, who had been a little quieter than usual, made a comment that completely took me by surprise. She looked at Amina and said, "Oh, so it's one of those ethnic businesses? I bet the food is good, but the whole vibe probably feels a little too much for me. Like, I don't know, something about that whole local culture thing can be a little overbearing." There was an uncomfortable silence in the room. Amina visibly stiffened, and the mood in the room shifted immediately. I didn't know how to respond at first, because I was shocked. Lily's comment was both racist and tone-deaf, and I couldn't believe she would say something like that in front of me, especially when she knew I was friends with Amina. After a few moments, I asked Lily what she meant by her comment, trying to keep the conversation calm but firm. Lily tried to backpedal, saying she didn't mean it in a bad way, but that sometimes she just finds the emphasis on local culture a little too much for her. I told her that I didn't appreciate what she said, and that it was a rude and thoughtless remark. I added that Amina didn't need to hear that, especially considering that she was a guest in my home. Amina, who had been silent up until that point, finally spoke up. She said that she did understand what Lily meant by ethnic businesses and that she found it hurtful. She pointed out that businesses in a neighborhood were reflections of the people who live there, and that having diverse places to support was something she took pride in. Lily tried to apologize, but the damage was done. The mood was completely ruined, and the rest of the evening felt awkward. After the dinner party, Amina left early, and I was left alone with Lily. I told her that I was really disappointed in her, and that I couldn't believe she had made that kind of comment. Lily tried to justify herself by saying she didn't mean anything bad by it, and that she was just expressing an opinion. I told her that her opinion was not only racist, but also incredibly insensitive, and that it made me uncomfortable. I said that I felt embarrassed by her behavior, especially since Amina was my neighbor and a friend. Lily got defensive and said that I was overreacting. She said she didn't mean to hurt anyone, but that I was being too sensitive. She told me that she had grown up in a more homogeneous community and that she wasn't used to being around so many different cultures. I told her that was no excuse for making a comment like that, and that she needed to do better. I also reminded her that she should have been more aware of the people around her, especially my home. The situation escalated from there. I told her that I needed some time to process everything and that I couldn't just let it slide. Lily got angry, saying that I was taking this way too seriously and that I was attacking her. She said I was acting like I was better than her because I had learned to embrace diversity and that I needed to stop policing her opinions. I told her that I didn't think we could continue our friendship if she didn't take responsibility for what she said, and that I needed some space to figure out where we stood. She asked if she could stay the night, as we had originally planned. But I told her that I didn't feel comfortable with her staying in my home after the comment she made. She was taken aback and tried to argue, but I told her that I needed her to leave. I told her I couldn't have someone who made racist remarks in my space, especially after I tried to explain why her comment was harmful. I said I was too upset and needed time to think. Lily left shortly after, and we haven't really spoken since. I received some messages from her trying to apologize, but they don't feel sincere to me. It feels like she's apologizing because she's been called out rather than because she truly understands the harm of what she said. I've been debating whether or not I should talk to her again, but I don't know if I can trust her anymore. I've spoken to a few mutual friends about what happened, and while they agree that the comment was inappropriate, some of them think I overreacted by kicking her out of my house. They said I should have just talked to her more calmly and given her a chance to reflect. Others think I did the right thing by standing up for Amina and setting boundaries with Lily. I'm still feeling conflicted. Did I overreact by kicking her out, or was I justified in ending our time together that night? AITA for kicking my best friend out of my house after she made a racist comment about my neighbor? AITA for not letting my sister stay at my house after she accused me of being selfish for not helping her financially? I, 30F, have a younger sister, Kate, 26F, who has always been a bit of a wild card in our family. Growing up, she was always the one who pushed boundaries, constantly testing limits, and doing things that cause a lot of stress for my parents. Despite all that, my parents have always been incredibly supportive of her, sometimes to the point of enabling her bad decisions. As a result, I've always felt like I've had to be the responsible one. I've been the one who gets her life together, works hard, and makes sure things are stable for myself. For context, I've been working a full-time job in marketing for the last 6 years and have been living independently since I was 23. I don't come from a wealthy family, but I've been able to save up a decent amount of money and have built up a small emergency fund. My sister, on the other hand, has struggled financially for years. She went through several jobs, some of which were not very stable, and her decision-making has often led her into tough financial situations. She's always expected others, mainly me or our parents, to bail her out when things get rough. Over the past year, Kate has been facing a lot of challenges. She lost a job due to company downsizing, and since then, she's been moving from place to place, staying with friends, and sometimes even staying in her car. While I feel bad for her, I've always told her that she needs to get her act together. I've given her advice on budgeting, applying for better jobs, and getting some career counseling, but she doesn't always listen. Instead, she often turns to me for financial help, claiming that she just needs a little push to get back on track. Now, fast forward to a few weeks ago. Kate called me crying, telling me that she was once again in a bad situation. She explained that she had been evicted from the last place she was staying due to her inability to pay rent. She said she had nowhere to go and that she was staying with a friend for the time being, but didn't know how long it would last. She asked if she could stay at my place for a while until she could figure things out. I love my sister, but I also know that letting her stay at my house is never as simple as it sounds. I live in a small apartment, and while I have a spare room, it's not that big. I also value my privacy and my personal space. I've let her stay with me once before, and it was a disaster. She'd stay up late, often making noise, and would bring her friends over without asking. I don't want to sound like I'm being dramatic, but it was hard for me to focus and feel comfortable in my own home. On top of that, I ended up having to cover her part of the rent for the time she stayed with me because she couldn't contribute financially. When she asked to stay again, I was torn. I wanted to help her, but I knew what it would cost me, emotionally, financially, and mentally. I thought about it for a while and then made the decision to offer a compromise. I told Kate that I could help her with a place to stay, but only for a short period, and there would be some conditions. I explained that I needed her to be responsible while staying with me. No bringing friends over without asking, no staying up all night, and I wanted her to contribute to the rent for the time she stayed. I also told her that I could help her look for a new job, but I wasn't in a position to give her any financial handouts anymore. I felt like I was being reasonable by setting boundaries and offering her a chance to get back on her feet while still maintaining my own stability. Kate's response caught me off guard. She immediately became defensive and accused me of being selfish. She told me that I should be helping her out more, especially since I've always had it easier than she has. She brought up how her parents have always given her money whenever she's needed it, and how it wasn't fair that I wasn't doing the same. She said that I was treating her like she was a burden and that I should be there for her unconditionally. I was shocked by her reaction, especially since I was offering to help in a way that felt fair to both of us. I tried to explain that I wasn't asking her to do anything unreasonable, but she didn't seem to hear me. She told me that I was being cold and heartless and that I didn't care about her problems. She also said that I was acting like just another person in her life who only takes and never gives. After a while, she hung up on me, and I was left feeling frustrated and hurt. I didn't want to be the bad guy, but I also knew that I couldn't continue enabling her behavior. A couple of days passed, and I heard from my mom, who told me that Kate was really upset with me. Apparently, she had been talking to my parents about how unsupportive I was being and how I was turning my back on her. My mom even suggested that I should just let Kate stay with me and stop being so harsh. I felt like my mom was undermining my decision and pressuring me to help Kate the way she wanted. I told my mom that I had already made my choice and that it wasn't healthy for either of us if I kept enabling Kate's behavior. My mom didn't take it well, and we got into a heated argument about it. Now, my sister is refusing to speak to me, and my mom has been giving me the silent treatment. I've also been getting messages from Kate asking why I'm being so cruel and how she's always been there for me when I've needed help. I know this is a big part of the issue. Kate feels like I owe her something because I've been more stable than she has. But the truth is, I've worked hard to get to where I am, and I don't feel that I should have to constantly bail her out. She needs to take responsibility for her own life, and I can't continue sacrificing my peace of mind and stability just because she's struggling. I've been second-guessing myself ever since all of this went down. I want to be there for my sister, but I don't want to lose myself in the process. My friends tell me that I made the right decision, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm being a bad sister for not offering her more help. So, AITA for not letting my sister stay at my house after she accused me of being selfish for not helping her financially. AITA for telling my best friend I no longer want to be friends after she started dating my ex. I, 28F, have been friends with Sarah, 29F, for almost 10 years. We met in college, and from day one, we just clicked. We were inseparable, sharing everything, from the most ridiculous inside jokes to personal struggles. We both dated during college, but neither of us had serious relationships until a few years later when I met Jack, 30M. Jack and I started dating when I was 25, and we were together for almost 3 years. To me, it was the kind of relationship I thought would last forever. We had some rough patches, but nothing that felt insurmountable. We talked about marriage, kids, and a future together. But ultimately, we broke up last year. It wasn't a messy breakup, and we parted on decent terms, though I'll admit I was heartbroken. Jack was a big part of my life, and I needed time to heal. During the aftermath of the breakup, Sarah was my rock. She was there for me in all the ways that friends are supposed to be. She listened when I vented about Jack. She came over with wine when I was having a rough day, and she even took me out on spontaneous trips to help me take my mind off things. After a few months, I started dating again, and while it was nice, I still wasn't fully over Jack. But I was healing, and I was moving forward. Fast forward to about 2 months ago. Sarah and I were hanging out at a local cafe, just like we'd done 100 times before, when she casually mentioned that she had started talking to Jack again. I was caught off guard, but I didn't immediately react negatively. She said that it was nothing serious and that they were just catching up as friends, but something about the way she said it made my stomach drop. It wasn't the first time they'd talked since the breakup. Jack and I had mutual friends, and we ran into each other on occasion, but the idea of Sarah and him reconnecting in any way felt weird to me. I told myself it was probably nothing, and I shouldn't make a big deal out of it. After all, we had both moved on from the past, right? A few weeks went by, and I tried to push it to the back of my mind. Then, one night, Sarah invited me over to her apartment for dinner. I showed up, and there, sitting on the couch, was Jack. At first, I thought I had misread the situation, but no. He was clearly comfortable in her space. They were laughing, joking, and it looked like they'd been spending a lot of time together. It was incredibly awkward for me, and I could feel my face go cold. I asked Sarah what was going on, and she seemed surprised by my reaction. She said that they had been seeing each other casually and that they'd started dating. She reassured me that it wasn't anything serious, but they had been getting closer over the past few weeks. I was speechless. It felt like a punch to the gut, and I couldn't control the anger that started bubbling up inside of me. I told her I needed a minute, and I stepped outside to catch my breath. I don't know how long I stood there, but when I came back in, I tried to keep my composure. I told her that I wasn't okay with this. I couldn't understand why, out of all the people she could date, she would choose to get involved with my ex. Sarah kept insisting that it wasn't a big deal, that they had just reconnected, and that it had nothing to do with me. She tried to brush it off like it was no big deal, but to me, it was a betrayal. It felt like a violation of the trust one had in her as a best friend. I asked her if she had been secretly seeing him behind my back, and she admitted that they had been talking more than I had known, but she didn't think it would bother me. I didn't know how to process it. On one hand, I wanted to tell her off and walk out of her life completely. On the other, I didn't want to make a rash decision that I'd regret. But deep down, I felt incredibly hurt. I told her that I couldn't be friends with someone who would do that to me. It felt like she was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The relationship I had with Jack was a huge part of my life, and now it felt like she was trying to erase that part of my history by jumping into it. I told her I needed some time to think about everything. Over the next few days, we didn't speak. I took time to process everything. I spoke to a few close friends about it, and while some of them thought I was overreacting, the majority agreed that it was messed up for Sarah to date my ex, especially without even asking how I felt about it. A couple of them said that if I wanted to maintain any sense of respect for myself, I needed to cut ties with both of them. I felt torn, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just some small betrayal. It was a serious breach of trust. A few days later, I reached out to Sarah and told her that I couldn't continue our friendship. I said that while I loved her as a friend, I could not stay friends with someone who would date my ex, especially when they knew how much it hurt me. I also told her that I felt like I had been incredibly open and vulnerable with her, and she should have known that this would be painful for me. She apologized and said she never meant to hurt me, but her actions spoke louder than her words. She said she understood why I was upset, but I told her I had already made up my mind. This wasn't something I could just move past. Since then, I've been getting a lot of pressure from mutual friends and even some family members who say I'm being too harsh. They argue that I should be happy for Sarah and that I'm being selfish by not letting her live her life and pursue happiness, even if that means being with someone I've dated in the past. They also point out that Jack and I broke up a year ago, so it shouldn't matter anymore. But it matters to me. I still have unresolved feelings about the breakup, and the idea of them being together just hurts. The whole situation feels like a slap in the face, and while I know I shouldn't let it dictate my life, I just can't pretend that it's not a huge deal. Now, I'm left wondering if I overreacted. Was I wrong to cut ties with my best friend over something that wasn't technically her fault? Should I have been more understanding? AITA for cutting Sarah out of my life for dating my ex? Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.